The Spin-off Podcast Network.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
We took it all. We brought them to our land. An endless night, ember hot and icy cold. The rage of the earth. We made this curse. Carved it in the blood on our backs. We did not see. We could not, but she did. And in the end...
What will I become?
Senua's Saga. Hellblade 2.
Play it now with Game Pass.
No mai hoki mai ki other fold e mihi ne ko Duncan Grieve tōku ingoa. My guest today is Chris Henry, who you might not have heard of, but you'll definitely be well aware of his work. He is the founder of 818 Publicity, who are an entertainment and experience publicity company who've worked on, honestly, almost every kind of big show, event, from, kind of laneway to, a lot of reality TV shows to kind of dramas to, recently the Mountain, Rachel House's directorial debut, to the ASB Tennis Classic and Sail GP in this kind of sports realm that they've started to open up lately. And he also founded People of Influence, which was a kind of an early influencer marketing company, but the influencers, their twist was that the influencers were, that came out of actors having this opportunity, but not necessarily knowing what to do with it. And so, his background is very much in the kind of the conventional media and entertainment space. He, the first time I met him, he was working at MTV, which was an organization I worked quite closely with and had a lot of friends who worked at and had a huge amount of kind of energy and creativity. And we talk about that era too. Went on to Shortland Street, which has been one of the great, it's done a million amazing things for this country, but narrowly in terms of publicity, a lot of the very best entertainment publicists sort of earned their stripes there. And then he went on to found 818, which turns 10 this week. And because it's 10 years old, its arc has perfectly paralleled the spin-offs. Founded it when digital media still felt kind of novel and social media like this kind of, amiable, sideshow before it kind of ate the world. But it's meant that he's worked through this period when the traditional, professional, institutional media has been under a kind of a big sustained attack in terms of audience and revenue, and digital has grown in these kind of vast and kind of in ways that were unimaginable when it started. So he's had to kind of navigate that from a publicist perspective and really figure out how to kind of live in both worlds. And I think, Chris is one of the most genuine and engaging people I know in this business, and so has always kind of been up for having a hard think about the role that each system plays, in the entertainment universe. Unavoidably, this conversation goes to some places about like the way that publicity can at times feel like it's pitching stories so that it can get free coverage on sites like The Spin-off or on TVNZ's Breakfast, while the spend goes into social media or out-of-home media, and the extent to which a successful PR campaign can, in a weird way, play a tiny role in the decay of the kind of media that they pitch to. Because a lot of the places that Chris would have pitched to 10 years ago aren't here anymore. It's obviously not 818's fault by any means, but I do sometimes think that there is a a misunderstanding about the way that marketing, publicity, and editorial, the extent to which they support one another in a sort of an ecosystem, a quite fragile ecosystem like the one we have now. But Chris gives a very thoughtful response to those questions. So I've wanted to have a publicist on this show for a while to have this kind of a conversation. Really glad it was Chris, who's someone I've known a long time, and we've kept in touch through the 10 years of our businesses growing alongside one another. And really enjoyed this, and very, very happy that 818's reached its 10th birthday just a few months before the spin-off does its own. So this is Chris Henry, the founder of 818 Publicity, on the Fold. Denakwe, Chris, welcome to the Fold.
Oh, kia ora, Duncan. Long-time listener, first-time guest.
No, I'm sorry. So, we've kind of 818 and the spin-off have grown up together, so it feels like appropriate that in our 10th year we're finally having this conversation with a hot mic.
It's awesome. I'm very excited. Thank you for having me.
No, thanks for coming up. But before we get into 818, I want to talk about a couple of jobs you had on the way here, which, will be the first time that we had any contact. The first of which was MTV New Zealand, and it still kind of seems mind-boggling in a way that even happened. In fact, it happened twice, but the second one was the one that we're talking about. Tell me about that role, what you did there, and what the sort of, the entertainment media culture of the time that allowed MTV New Zealand to even exist at all.
It was totally a wild time. I'd often describe it to other people as like kids running a television channel, but very well. Like, it was a group of like-minded people who just were so thrilled that they could be doing this. They were the little brothery offshoot from Australia where they could kind of do not what they wanted, but they were given a lot of reign to do stuff. And we made some amazing things, and some really awesome people came out of it and have made some incredible work since then. I worked in kind of the early days of integration, really, is probably the best way it was described. We put on a super sweet 16th birthday for a young woman who now is like working as a production manager on TV shows, and I run into her all the time, and I'm like, oh wow, I helped organize your 16th birthday. To like doing a whole lot of like client content out of Australia. It was really cool stuff, possibly a little bit before its time, but it was so much fun to be part of.
It was just such a big and diverse media ecosystem now, and it just kind of, it feels like that era where there was just so much that on the local ground, it was just a very, very different time. And from there you went to the true juggernaut of the local media, especially youth media at the time, which was Shortland Street. Kind of imperiled now, but you were there for the absolute kind of heart of the prime in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I was there at the 20th birthday.
And like that team, kind of Tamar and Rachel, and like that was just, I mean, can you just talk about, because I think that people forget just how enormous and consequential Shortland Street was as a kind of a cultural object at the time.
Oh, absolutely. So I was there just before the 20th birthday, and I'm incredibly grateful for the job because I'd been working at MTV, then I went and worked on super yachts for a year in the south of France, and sort of came back thinking...
Below deck.
Real below deck vibes. And had an amazing time, but was a little bit sort of square peg, round hole. I wanted to work on the inside of the boat, but I wasn't really female or blonde enough to have a successful run at it. So I came back, and Tamar sort of, possibly at the time against her better judgment, gave me a role that I was possibly overqualified for, but I hadn't worked in publicity before. And sort of once I found out what it was all about, I was like, that's probably what I should have been doing all the time. Like, this is a full match of my skill set. But going into Shortland Street, especially around the 20th birthday, was incredible. Like, the people that were on Shortland Street at that time were uber famous. They were the people that would get stopped in the supermarket. You couldn't take them anywhere without there being crowds of people. The social media was like in its early stages, but still had a massive Facebook page. Like, I don't think I'm exaggerating. I think maybe it would have been like 250,000 people on Facebook at that time, which is pretty big for a local TV show. And people just loved it. Like, it had an element of coolness, I think, and people were happy to be engaged with it.
I mean, it must have been an amazing place to learn the art of publicity
100%.
on the really kind of the biggest property that there was. So yeah, just talk me through how, what the sort of learning environment was, and the kind of the things you were pitching. What was the sort of go-to strategy for Shortland Street back then?
Well, I suppose firstly, from a learning perspective, and I think what is the most amazing part of Shortland Street, and everyone always talks about it's a training ground for crew and all these crew come up, but that's the same for people that work offhand. So that show shoots 48 weeks a year, and you work in the building it shoots in. So all day, you've got a window on a TV screen on the wall that's playing Ferndale. You get to hone your craft of unit publicity and publicity because you are inside it all day. And that was incredible. In terms of what we were kind of pitching, there was always pages to be filled in magazines. Those were the days where, and I'll do a bit of like those were the days, but those were the days where there were 3 major local magazines. There was New Idea, there was The Weekly and Woman's Day, who were all hungry for content every single week. So you'd be doing personal stories, friendship stories, storyline-based stuff, a lot of charity stuff. The variety was massive and no 2 days were the same, but also by having those amazing talent, it meant that you could kind of do all of those bits and bobs, but then still had the ability to be able to pitch things in a more, like in that higher brow media space. They were kind of interested in what was going on. It was very, very cool. And I've made lifelong friends out of it that still are my closest colleagues and confidants.
Yeah, we're living through this era where there are these big institutions kind of disappearing quite regularly, and it's kind of now being openly discussed that Shortland Street, which has for so long been an advertising funded juggernaut that really sets up, and TV2 is kind of unimaginable without it. Do you what would the local industry lose if Shortland Street were to become non-viable and not be rescued?
It would lose a huge amount. It would lose the people that get their start that then go on to make bigger things. Like, I think that the flow-on effect would be that if you looked at the crew that are working on big international films that are here, like the new Lord of the Rings when it comes here, all of those crews will have a credit of Shortland Street as part of them, whether they worked there for a little bit or a long time, or whether they got their in from those people. So I think if we didn't have Shortland Street, to be honest, we would be a less attractive international destination for film, would be one aspect to it. And then I think culturally, we'd lose the ability for our stories to be told on such a regular basis. They've got 48 weeks a year that they're filling of storylines. They've got the ability to be covering a lot of ground in terms of what's happening culturally and socially and all that sort of stuff. And I think they would lose that, which I think would be a huge shame.
It does feel like it's underrated that the extent to which Shortland Street is listening to and responding to the kind of ambient culture at all times.
100%. I mean, some of the stats aren't quite in front of me, but you're talking like the first gay wedding on television. The multiculturalness of the cast that are part of it, dealing with asexuality, dealing with lots of different aspects, terrorism, all of that sort of stuff. And I think they've got the ability, because it runs for such a long period of time, to be able to push the envelopes with those storylines, and they work. But if they don't get responded to, then you move on. And I think,
it's a machine.
It's definitely a machine.
So, not long after that, in 2014, you basically take a big swing and launch your own company in 818, and it's I think the 10th birthday party's next week as we record this. Can you tell me what the sort of big idea was? Like, a lot of publicity in the entertainment space was done in-house at the time, and that's what you had been doing. Why did you think that there was this room for a sort of an independent?
Well, I think when I first started it, I was under this impression that to be an entrepreneur, you had to have come up with an idea that nobody had thought of before. And I got stuck on that for years, that, if I wanted to run a business, I would have had to have thought about this crazy, wacky idea that no one's done before. But that's not true. You can start a business doing anything that people are already doing. And so once I kind of had that realization, I was like, well, maybe I could continue to do this. I was really lucky in my job at Shortland Street. I had got a maternity cover, which had led me to sort of become superfluous to requirements, which is the biggest gift that I could have got, because I couldn't go back to my old job, so I kind of had no choice. So after a short little contract stint on a small show called X Factor, I then started the business, kind of, to be fair, as a freelancer, and the work just grew and grew. And I was like, actually, maybe I could have more people to support me and to help me out. And that's when the staff came. And once that was sort of in the works, it just went from there. And I'm still amazed about how many different avenues and places there are for us, like clients for us to work with. Like, we're constantly bringing on new clients. People are doing new stuff that we can be part of. It's really helped the growth, and yes, I'm very proud of it.
You should be. Can you talk about what like a typical rollout looks like at the time? Essentially, I'm asking you to describe the media environment of the time from a publicist perspective.
So, to be honest, it's not as different as it is today. It is just a bit smaller these days. I think back in the day, you know, we still had our weekend newspapers, our daily newspapers, magazines, TV, and radio. You sort of had the opportunity to go a bit wider and there'd be a bit more niche-based media, but it's not hugely different to where we are now. You know, we still had the early days of influencers. You know, they just happened to be celebrities as they kind of are now. You know, your radio hosts and your television presenters and stuff like that. We did have the ability in those days to just have really blanket coverage, you know, like, for example, take the Shortland Street example, you know, when there was a big birthday or something, you could really make sure you had something in every single publication. Now I think that media are stretched to a point where there's not often room or ability to get everything that we want across the line, even if the interest is there. And I suppose that's probably the change that's happened over time.
You mentioned the influencer piece. Was there a sort of a moment when you kind of realized, you know, the extent to which that force of social media user-generated content was rising and would, you know, start to compete with and kind of contest ground that was previously owned default by kind of conventional media?
Yeah, definitely. I wouldn't be able to put a date on it, but there was definitely times early, you know, a good maybe 5-8 years ago where those sort of people were becoming more and more part of our plans and how things were happening. Often with, like, especially on the live front with big shows that you're bringing into town, sometimes you have you need to find new ways of telling the stories. I remember once doing a piece of influencer content with an influencer where we had a Cirque du Soleil coming that was called it was not Turok, it was the one before that. They were all, and it was Turok, all avatar-faced characters. And we got an influencer to be made up like that character to go across their channels. And it had huge success, and it sold heaps and heaps of tickets. And I think we were dipping our toes in the water of that around that time. Now, the influencer market is so wide, and there's so many people that are part of it, it's now being about being a bit more discerning around how you interact with those people at different stages of the campaign. You know, if you've got a big, flashy opening night, you want to have those big, flashy influencers that are there. If you want to be trying to do some more nuanced content or trying to tell a specific message, then you need to look a little bit deeper at the people. There's more choice.
Do you typically pitch to them in the same way? Here is an opportunity and it's tailored to you, or, you know, are these paid opportunities? Like what does the sort of the kind of commercial rationale look like in that influencer area?
Well, we're quite lucky, to be fair, because the product that we are trying to sell is something that people want to either go to or attend, essentially. So we've got a little bit more leverage in terms of being able to do in-kind activity.
Yeah.
I'll always say to a client, if we're doing in-kind activity, that's a great way of us going about it, but you have to be happy with what that person is doing and how they're going to do it. And so it has to make sense of who the right person is and that they're well briefed. But we're not entering a commercial arrangement, so therefore we have to throw it to the wind in a slight way versus going down the paid route. The paid route, it can be really good, especially these days with video content. You know, if you want a really snazzy example of an event that you've got coming up, or that you've been to, or that you've had, using an influencer can be a really cost-effective way of getting a video that you might normally have paid a videographer to make that goes on your own channels. So there's different ways of using them, but I think that they fit really nicely into the ecosystem of PR.
Along the way, you ultimately went from sort of working with influencers to actually sort of founding an agency to interact with in people of influence, which you've since sold. But do you want to just quickly sort of top line what prompted you to do that and how, what the theory of that organization was?
Yeah, totally. So People of Influence came about sort of not by choice. It was a situation where we were working with all of these actors that were like, I keep getting these DMs about trying to promote this product and I don't know what to do about it. And I don't want to be the person that just holds a can of Coke up in front of my face and is like, drink Coke. And so I was like, okay, well, is there a way that we can do it that means that you can look at people who have true influence, so people have influence outside the internet, that was always the criteria of being part of the business, and allow them to explore that paid model. Because you think about also from an actor's perspective, unless you're on Shortland Street, you might get paid twice a year, 3 times a year maybe, if you're a really good actor and did 3 different shows in a year. But there's a lot of time through that period where you are still really influential, but you're not currently receiving a paycheck. So being able to participate in that way, I think made a huge amount of sense. And by doing that and touching base with a few of those people that had kind of been banging the drum about it, we built a really successful business. And now I'm really excited. The wonderful team at Thompson Spencer bought the business and have done a really fantastic job at nurturing the kaupapa of what we were trying to do. And I'm just having such a good time just like being out there on the sidelines, just applauding and adding my thumbs up emojis to Instagram posts and just like wishing it really well, because it's a great idea and I'm really proud of it.
We took it all. We brought them to our land. An endless night, ember hot and icy cold. The rage of the earth. We made this curse. Carved it in the blood on our backs. We did not see. We could not, but she did. And in the end...
What will I become? Senua's Saga. Hellblade 2.
Play it now with Game Pass.
Talofa lover, I'm Madeline Chapman, editor at The Spinoff. If you have the means, consider supporting our high-quality journalism by becoming a Spinoff member. Sign up now at thespinoff.co.nz/donate.
So how did PR kind of evolve over the 10 years you've been running 818? Because like I think about special PR and that's born out of very international facing ad agency. They do effectively, it seems to me a lot of the time, these kind of giant stunts that capture a huge amount of media attention. And you go to the Prezi Awards and you see what the industry creates now, and it's so different from the sort of story pitched idea that really was the default when you started. Can you give a sense of how the industry has evolved?
Yeah, totally. I think that there's a lot more of a demand to get attention from people's eyeballs, and that is a lot harder. I think that we are in quite an interesting space where a lot of the work that we do still has really amazing physical talent as part of it, which means that that traditional part of PR is something that we can definitely exist in. But through the way that other PR agencies are doing it and how they're growing those sort of stunt-based ideas and using research is a really key one that I'm seeing people use a lot of, commissioning studies and doing content to be able to get themselves into other PR ideas is, I suppose, is also a response back from the media landscape, instead of being like, I did this cool thing, you should cover it, actually giving that media organization the ability or the information or enough legs for them actually to be able to create content out of it. And I think that those special guys actually do a fantastic job. But I've got a real little man crush on that business. And
fair play.
Yeah. You got to respect the competitors.
Well, absolutely, and anything that kind of drives innovation within a vertical. In terms of the other thing that's happened through that period, and unavoidable, you have to touch on this, is the sense that a lot of the, just as you referred to that, like hyper-competitive, sort of women's or celebrity magazine market, and how, that sort of has changed. Just magazines in general have kind of come back a lot. An institution like The Project, which ran for a long time, was an amazing place to place things, just not there anymore. And News Hub is about to go the same way. How has that sort of change the nature of the job, especially for someone who's in that entertainment space, who still does a lot of work interacting with their sort of professionalized media, for a bit of a word.
Well, I think it's a huge loss that we've lost some of those places. I think that now's a really interesting time because I think that almost cyclically it looks almost like the beginning of COVID again, where there was a great sort of bushfire of burn down and then, come on a year or so and things have started to come back. I don't know whether that'd be quite the same for broadcast television in terms of those particular ways, but it definitely means that we have to be smarter about where we place stuff. We also have to be really reflective of where the audience for our particular project are consuming our content or are consuming content in general to make sure we get there. We take a lot of time at really thinking about where our audience is going and how they consume media on a daily basis to make sure that our pitches are going in that right space. But there is no denying that it is challenging that those media outlets don't exist anymore. And I hope that they will find newish homes to come back in different formats. Like you're seeing the likes of like Tahi, which is a podcast that RNZ does. They're going from strength to strength in terms of their ability to get out editorial content, which is maybe a space that might have lived a little bit where the project lives now. And you can see stuff in the Herald and you guys all sort of doubling down on video. There are different places that now exist or will exist that have replaced the old ones.
In terms of the relationship between PR and the sort of those institutions, something that I sort of think about at times is the way that you'll see say it's a show or an event, and you'll get this pitch from a PR person who you really like, and it's a story that you love, but it's always just a direct pitch. I leverage your talent, your audience for to kind of tell a story about this upcoming this object. Whereas you'll then go outside and see a bunch of outdoor media or social media, which is paid, and on some level it can feel like there is the part of the institutional decay is the fact that ad spend is seen as default going to those kind of mediums, and then the professionalized ones are seen as earned media. Can do you reflect on that when you talk to brands? Because ultimately, if you follow that to its logical conclusion, there won't be any places to pitch to, and then everything is paid, and PR kind of has to, maybe it just pitches to influencers. I'm not saying that there isn't going to be a place for it, but there is that weird paradox of the professionalized media shrinking, the comms industry expanding, and the relationship between the two feeling kind of unbalanced at times. Yeah,
totally. And it's a really tricky question because I think it falls in two parts. One, and this is something that I think that PR could really benefit for, would be for PR and marketing to be scoped alongside each other. At the moment, we are scoped on the publicity, the earned media parts of campaigns. So, for example, when brands are talking about editorial partnerships or commercial partnerships, it doesn't fall under our remit. So, as much as we can be on the side championing what's going on, it's not directly our responsibility. And maybe there needs to be conversation around those becoming more parts of the conversation. The second part of it is, and I think this is a real big client conversation, is a lot of clients that we work with, when we're talking about things in that space, they have worry about precedence. We've done it once, so will we have to do it again? There's no silver bullet about how it's best to go, and I think that the comment that you make and the fear or projection is really valid. And I think that it's probably on us to be finding more ways that we can be bringing marketing into what we're doing to mean that we still have a viable business going forward in terms of getting features and content inside publications without our traditional way of working, where it's finding that right story to be able to create a piece of interesting content for you guys and for other organizations.
It's a really it's really tricky, right? Because you have to maintain the editorial independence, and not every piece of editorial content is going to be favourable. You know, if it's a review or even if it's the angle you pick up, that's kind of
Absolutely.
a given. But equally, you know, if there's nothing there, then the story is really it's different and harder to tell. But and I sort of go back and forth on that. But it does seem to me that there's just enough of a body of evidence that if there isn't any ever advertising sport, which has been certainly the case for quite some time. I think that you think about an object like Time Out, which was the way a product like the Spin-Off would have been made in a prior era. It would have been thick with ads for events, some of which were covered, some of which weren't. It would have had cinema listings. It would have had this whole bundle of stuff that ultimately paid for the editorial content up front. And that link has just been broken. And, we just sort of see how that story ends. But, so it is something that I think the whole of the ecosystem, whether it's us, our editorial, commercial, and PR and marketing, needs to think about how we sort of support one another, because we do know where this is going.
Totally. And I think that it's also an industry-wide conversation, especially around other mediums. You know, one of the big things that we like to think about from the way that we work is, you know, if you look at sort of, say, breakfast television in its general form across all networks, and commercial radio, and to some instances, non-commercial radio, you know, we really pride ourselves often on being that partnership with those people, because they've got slots to fill every week and every morning. So there is opportunity there for us to be providing value to them in terms of the stuff that we're creating. So finding ways that conversation can exist right across the market, so that not a certain part of the industry is the one that collapses off the back of there not being that support, I think would be really key and a really good conversation to be having.
No, I agree. Let's talk about the sort of evolution of 818 in recent years, because when I first got to know you, and we would talk in the kind of early years of both these businesses, it was very much in the entertainment space. Yeah. And I guess it still is in a way, but it's moved into sort of sports as a form of entertainment. Did you see yourself going there? And what have you sort of discovered bringing in an entertainment lens and approach to a medium and an area that has typically been quite a long way away from from entertainment, from that approach? Yeah,
totally. And actually, to be honest, I credit a very good friend of mine, Tracy McGann, who who's the event director for the ASB Classic. Back in the early MTV days, one of the cool things that they did was that they matched every single person that worked in the office with a mentor in the industry. And Tracy and I were matched as a mentor. She was, she'd had some amazing success in touring. She'd toured with U2 and done all these amazing things. And we've always stayed in touch ever since. As we kind of have come backwards and forwards with each other, when she got this role, I was like, this sounds amazing. And she made the very valid point to me that she said that it's just like a festival. It's like a big concert that happens. And so by us kind of pitching in for that work and looking at it from an outside perspective and going, well, it's actually not really about the tennis. It's actually about the experience. It's no different to a Laneway or a Rhythm and Vines or a Splaw or anything like that. So why are our skills not in any way non-transferable for that? So we got into it. For full credit, there's an amazing sports media manager there that deals with the sports journos who can speak all of the cricket. Sorry, not the cricket. Or that shows how much I know about it. Or the tennis terminology. I know juice, love. But we just sold it as a fun event, and I think that it worked really well. We got people to come along who just like a day out, and we explained to people how the outside of the tennis experience was, the serve, all of that sort of stuff, and people really took it on. And then we used those same skills to do the same thing for SailGP down in Christchurch, where you don't need to know anything about sailing. If you like high octane and energy and entertainment, then you'll love this event.
Yeah, and I think that's what's sort of interesting about the way that you've approached it is I think that if you historically people were very sort of kept in their buckets.
Yep.
I'm a sports fan, I'm a music fan, and we typically almost resent one another, was the idea. But, I think if you go to an NBA game, it is such a show. And to be fair to the Breakers, they sort of pioneered that here. Rugby games were pretty kind of low production value affairs. They had this kind of presumption of we win as of right.
Yeah.
And then, but you go to the tennis now, as I did this year, thank you. And it's, the atmosphere around the tennis, like you could very happily spend a half day there without seeing a ball hit in anger, and it sort of makes you realize that ultimately they're competing all for the same dollar and on some level the same audience.
Absolutely. We've even sort of kind of tried to change some of our thinking in terms of, like, we used to refer to ourselves as an entertainment PR agency. And now we're trying to make sure we're putting the word experiences into there, because essentially that's what we're selling. We're representing a breadth of clients that are all going after that same entertainment discretionary dollar, whether that's hiring or subscribing to a streaming service, or watching a television show, or going to a movie or a concert or a festival or a sports event. It all comes out of the same pot. And I think that there is room in the market for all of those different aspects. And it's definitely seen. People are, we know that times are tough, and the general PR coming out of the country at the moment is, tighten those belts, get yourself sorted. But I tell you what, people are buying tickets to go and experience stuff. And for that, I am eternally grateful.
Well, that's the paradox, right? Like, we have this kind of, this huge net outflow, and particularly to Australia, we have this sense of there being this cost of living crisis, and we also have concerts selling out almost on launch.
And ones that are miles away, like 6 months away, 8 months away, a year away.
Yeah, it's quite an interesting paradox. It's almost like the worse things get, the more that you cling to this one night as a salve to that. Yeah. So, you're 10 years next week, and kind of dealing with this very different environment to the one that you were birthed into. Do you want to give me a sense of where 818's going, and kind of what makes you sort of excited about operating, even notwithstanding the challenges that are in the environment?
I'm incredibly excited about the future. I think we've been through some really tough years as a country, and I know that times right now are not necessarily the most rosy that they've been. Going forward, I am excited about us continuing to have projects that have really great interest, and so therefore our ability to work with media is strong. I really pride ourselves on the level of work that we do. So, for example, when we are able to pitch to you guys, we know we're coming in with something that you guys will be interested in, and that gives me great pride that we're not just filling inboxes with stuff that we don't believe in. And we're very lucky that those projects exist for us. Going forward, I'm excited about a bit more diversification. I've got a couple of business ideas that work in tandem for the work that we're doing. There's a bit of kind of wider industry stuff that I would be quite keen for us to play a helpful hand in. I'd love to emulate some of the successes of other clients that we've got and start to look at a bit more of the event stuff. I run a LGBT club night called Misbehavior, which is a shit ton of fun, but I've always found that I've been too far in the business to really get it together. But stand by, we've got 3 more dates to go out for the back end of the year, and that's really exciting. I am excited about the future. I feel like my big worry when I first started the business was like, oh God, how would I do the same thing over and over again for the rest of my life? But I mean, as you rightly know, you can grow up through a business. I've got a totally different job that I had even 2-3 years ago. I have an amazing team of people that work with me. They all have really key roles and responsibilities. And now it's time for me to find new things to be doing within the business. Take a leaf out of Duncan Gray's book, become founder and senior contributor to the business.
Please don't take a leaf out of my book. Hey, Chris, thanks so much for coming up. And congratulations on 10 years of 818. It's been a pleasure working together throughout that period. And look forward to seeing where it all goes for you.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been a real honour.
Kia ora e te iwi, Te Aihe Butler here, podcast manager at The Spinoff. If you enjoy listening to our podcasts, consider supporting our mahi by signing up to become a Spinoff member at thespinoff.co.nz/donate.
The Spinoff Podcast Network.